Hey guys, tonight we're going to drift back, way back, to a time before time was even properly measured. We're going to a place of myth, a world still soft and new, to tell the story of a goddess you may not have heard of, that whose work you are using right now just by reading this. We're going to explore how a quiet, almost overlooked goddess named ARCE had literally laid the groundwork for civilization as we know it, not with thunder and lightning, but with a reed pen and a patient heart. Imagine a world with no to-do lists, no reminders, no books. It's a world where your entire job description, your family history, and the recipe for bread all had to live exclusively inside your head. You might actually be more organized, or you might just end up staring blankly at a pile of barley, having forgotten the crucial first step. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's a small, quiet click for you, but it makes a huge difference for this little corner of our world. And while you're at it, drop your city and the time in the comments. I love picturing where these stories are landing all over the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The world is new. Not just new like a fresh coat of paint, but truly, fundamentally new. Still soft around the edges, still cooling. You are standing on the first patch of solid ground to rise from the endless, swirling, chaotic waters of new. This is the primordial hill, the first place in all of creation. Around you, the great gods of Egypt are busy. Ra is tracing the path of the sun across the sky with a sweep of his majestic arm. Osiris is teaching the first humans how to coax life from the rich. Black soil, Till, the great craftsman, is dreaming the world into existence, naming each thing and giving it form. It is a world of immense power, of breathtaking creation, but it is also a world without permanence. Everything that matters the names of the gods, the secret story of creation, the sacred hymns that keep the universe in balance exists only in the air. It lives in the breath of a priest, in the cadence of a chant, in a story told around the first fire. This is the central, sacred pillar of existence, the oral tradition. A law is only real for as long as it is remembered and repeated correctly. A history is only as immortal as the memory of the person telling it. A forgotten line, or misremembered name, and a piece of reality flakes away, lost forever into the silence. Even the gods are bound by this. Ra decrees the path of the sun, but the decree is a sound, not a thing. Isis works a powerful spell, but its formula is a whisper, passed from her lips to the ears of Horus, as fragile as a dragonfly's wing. The world is held together by a beautiful, but terrifyingly delicate, web of memory. And in this world, words are not just descriptions, they are raw power. The act of speaking a thing into being is the highest form of magic. A divine force the Egyptians called Hiko. This is a fascinatedly direct concept, authoritative utterance. The right words, spoken in the right order with the right intent, don't just describe reality. They create it. They can heal the sick, command the stars, or protect the soul in the underworld. But this power is fleeting. It lasts only as long as the sound vibrates in the air before dissolving back into the silence from which it came. It has to be constantly renewed, constantly spoken, to keep the world from unraveling. The very nature of these gods you're surrounded by is a subject of beautiful, endless debate. Were they born as fully formed personalities, as the hymns and chants tell you? Or, as human scholars would later argue for millennia, did they evolve slowly? Did they grow from local spirits of the river and the desert, from the personification of the sun's warmth and the sky's deep mystery? Was the god Anubis always the master of embalming, or was he once just a nameless desert jackal, whose divine portfolio and story grew with every telling, with every generation that added a new verse to his tale? Without a written record, the original truth is as fluid as the Nile itself. Historians still argue about whether the great myths we know were codified early on, or if they were in a state of constant, regional flux for centuries. It's a world of glorious, brilliant, and deeply anxious impermanence. Everything is fluid, nothing is fixed. A promise made by a god, is only as strong as that god's memory. A boundary between fields is only as real as the two farmers who agree on it. And in the midst of all this divine, booming, echoing speech, one goddess is quiet. She is watching, she is listening, and she is beginning to notice the fraying edges of memory. She sees the potential for chaos in a forgotten word, and the potential for order in a mark that stays. And so, your attention shifts from the booming voices of the great creator gods and settles on this quiet figure. She stands slightly apart from the main divine assembly, not out of shyness, but out of focus. This is Seshat. Her name, in the tongue of the ancient ones, means she who scribes, or the female scribe. It is not a name of power, like Lord of the Sun, or of magic, like Great of Sorcery. It is a job description. She is the universe's first divine filing clerk. You look at her and she doesn't have the terrifying animal head of a Sekhmet or the regal falcon visage of a Horus. She appears as a woman, dressed in a simple sheath dress, that over it, she wears the skin of a leopard. This is her signature attire, the dappled cove, the most silent and watchful of hunters. It's a symbol of her ability to move unseen, to observe without being noticed. It also connects her to the priests who performed sacred rituals, who wore the same garment. She is both a goddess and the ultimate priestess. This is the main mythological point. Seshat's role was not to create grand concepts, but to measure, count, record, and give order to the creations of others. While Ra was busy making the sun, Seshat was the one already wondering how to build a sundial. While Osiris taught agriculture, she was the one figuring out how to tally the harvest. She is the goddess of accounting, of architecture, of astronomy, of census taking, of libraries, and of measurement in all its forms. She is the patron deity of the specific, the quantifiable, and the real. Look above her head. She wears the most unique and mysterious emblem in the entire Egyptian pantheon. This is a fascinating, quirky detail that has puzzled Egyptologists for over a century. It's a 7-pointed star, or perhaps a stylized rosette, set on a long stem, and then topped with what looks like a pair of horns, or an inverted crescent moon. No one knows for sure what it represents. Is it a star, connecting her to astronomy? Is it a flower from a now extinct Papyrus species, connecting her to writing? Is it some long forgotten surveying tool? Ancient texts never explain it. It is simply her symbol, unique and inscrutable. Small, permanent mystery floating above the head of the goddess of clarity. In the divine court, she doesn't speak often. She listens. You watch as Ra declares a great victory over the serpent of chaos. Aipe, the other gods cheer and celebrate the grand, cosmic triumph. Seshat listens, and in her mind, she is already composing the narrative. She is noting the sequence of events, the specific divine weapons used, the exact duration of the battle, because she knows that a victory half remembered is a victory half lost. The details matter. The details are what make a story real, what make a lesson learnable, what turn a fleeting event into lasting history. Her very existence brings up a theological question that scholars of Egyptian religion still gently debate. What, precisely, was her relationship to Thoth, the great ibis-headed god of wisdom, magic, and the moon? He is often seen as the ultimate source of all knowledge, the one who invented language and writing in principle. Yet Seshat is the one who puts it into practice. In some texts, she is called his daughter. In others, his wife. In many, she is simply his constant companion and chief assistant. Was she his subordinate, taking his ground, abstract ideas and doing the necessary clerical work? Or were they two sides of the same coin? A divine partnership where his abstract wisdom was perfectly balanced by her concrete application. Was he the dreamer and she the doer? This ambiguity defines her. She is essential, yet she is always in a supporting role. She holds the tool that builds civilization, but she doesn't sit on the main throne. She is the power behind the throne, the one who ensures that the decrees of the King of the Gods are not just spoken, but recorded, measured, and enacted. She is the goddess of the how, while others are gods of the what and the why. Without her, the grand pronouncements of the other gods would be nothing more than beautiful, fading echoes in the vastness of creation. She is the force of permanence in a world of constant change, and she is beginning to understand that memory, even a god's memory, is not strong enough to hold the universe together. She needs a better tool. The first person you would naturally seek out if you needed a new tool for the mind is the keeper of all knowledge himself. And so you follow Seshat as she makes her way to the cool, quiet halls of Thoth. Thoth, the ibis minus-headed, the master of divine words, the way of truth. If the Egyptian pantheon were a modern corporation, Ra would be the CEO, Osiris the head of production. But Thoth would be the entire IT department, the legal team, and the head of research and development, all rolled into one. He is, for lack of a better term, the universe's chief nerd. You find him not in a grand throne room, but in a vast, echoing chamber bathed in a cool, lunar light, for he is also a god of the moon. He stands hunched over a great stone table, not writing, for writing does not yet truly exist, but contemplating. You see him in his classic form, the body of a man, the head of a sacred ibis, with a long, elegantly curved beak that clicks softly as he thinks. He is the divine arbitrator, the one who mediated the epic, sub-minus operatic squabble between Horus and Set. He is the ultimate voice of reason in a world run on passion. This is his domain, pure, abstract knowledge. This is the central concept of Thoth's power. He doesn't just know facts. He understands the very architecture of reality. He is the master of the big ideas, while Seshat is wondering how to count the bags of grain. Thoth is contemplating the very nature of mathematics, while she is observing the stars to mark the seasons. He is drafting the universal laws of celestial mechanics. He is the theorist. She is the experimentalist. You watch as Seshat approaches him. She has a problem, a practical one. She needs a way to make knowledge stick, to give it from outside the fallible memory of gods and mortals. Thoth looks up, and he understands the question before she even asks it. He gestures with a long, slender hand, and invites you both to see his solution. But it is not what you expect. You step into his library, that there are no scrolls, no books. Instead, you are in a vast, misty space where ideas themselves drift and hum in the air like captured nebulae. This is a wonderfully strange and niche concept from the lore. Thoth's knowledge is elemental. You see the concept of justice glowing with a steady, golden light. The idea of infinity pulses with a deep, silent, purple rhythm in a far corner. The physical laws of the universe are here, beautiful, complex, but utterly intangible. He plucks a small, humming sphere of light from the air. This, he explains in a voice that sounds like dry reeds rustling, is the idea of seven. It is perfect, eternal, and completely useless for counting actual things. This is the very heart of the quiet, scholarly debate about their relationship and their respective roles in the invention of writing. Did Thoth, as the god of wisdom, invent the grand idea of writing? Did he conceptualize the very possibility of using a symbol to represent a sound or an object, and then hand this brilliant, abstract blueprint to Seshat to work out the messy, practical details of alphabets and grammar? This is the top-down theory, where innovation flows from the great mind to the diligent hand. Or does the truth flow the other way? Some historians and mythologists argue that Seshat, faced with the concrete problems of running a universe, tallying harvests, measuring land, recording bloodlines, developed a system of marks and symbols out of pure necessity. In this bottom-up view, writing was born from a grand philosophical concept, but from the ancient equivalent of tally marks scratched on a piece of bone. Thoth, as the god of all knowledge, would then have naturally adopted this brilliant new invention, becoming its divine patron and incorporating it into his own mythos. We will never know for sure. The myths themselves are ambiguous, sometimes naming him the inventor, other times her. Seshat looks at the perfect, glowing concept of seven in Thoth's hand, and then she looks at her own empty hands. She understands. He has given her a beautiful, perfect, and entirely philosophical answer. But it won't help her when a tax collector needs to know if a farmer has delivered 6 jars of oil or 7. She needs something that can be scratched in the mud, painted on a pot, or pressed into clay. She needs something that can leave a mark in the real world. She bows respectfully to the great God of wisdom. She thanks him for his insight. But as she walks away from his cool, lunar hole of abstracts, you can see a new determination in her eyes. She realizes the solution will not be found in a god's mind. It will be found in the world. Leaving the abstract perfection of Thoth's domain, you find yourself back in the world of gods and mortals, a world that is vibrant in delight, but also increasingly messy. The lack of a permanent record is no longer just a philosophical problem. It's starting to cause some serious divine and earthly headache. You are about to witness the consequences of a universe running on a purely oral operating system, and it is not pretty. The scene opens in the Great Hall of Judgment, where the gods are settling a dispute between 2 villages. The argument is over the boundary line between their fields, a tale as old as agriculture itself. The headman of the first village stands up and declares, with great passion, that the boundary has always been marked by the great sycamore tree. He knows this because his father told him. Who was told by his father? Who was told by the first man to ever till that soil? A man blessed by Osiris himself. It is a matter of sacred, ancestral memory. Then, the headman of the second village stands up, his face a mask of righteous indignation. The sycamore tree, preposterous. Everyone knows the true boundary is the large grey boulder 20 paces to the east of the tree. He knows this because his great-grandfather, a man favored by Geb, the earth god, had declared it so after a particularly good flood deposited the boulder there. His village has remembered this truth for just as many generations. This is the core of the problem. Both men are telling the truth as they know it. Their memories are sincere, but over the centuries, memories shift. A story gets embellished. A landmark changes. That sycamore tree has grown, his shadow falling on a different patch of land. That boulder might have been rolled a few feet by a later flood, without a fixed point of reference, a deed, a map, a single unchanging record. There is only, he said, she said, stretched over generations. The gods listen, sighing. It is an impossible case to judge. This brings us to a slightly comical, but very real, niche problem faced by the divine administration, the hymn of 1,000 verses. Imagine a sacred hymn to Ra, a prayer of immense power that ensures the sun will rise every morning. The hymn is long, complex, and has to be recited perfectly, but the head priest in Thebes recites it one way, while the head priest in Memphis has a slightly different version. His version has 2 extra verses about the sun's journey through the 12th hour of the night, which he swears are the most important part, though the band priest insists these verses are a later, heretical addition. They appeal to Thoth, who, as the god of divine words, is supposed to be the final authority. He closes his eyes and consults his perfect, abstract memory of the hymn. The problem is, his memory is too perfect. He remembers every version ever chanted, every regional variation, every priest who ever coughed in the middle of a verse. To him, they are all equally valid expressions of the hymn's essence. He declares that both versions are, in their own way, true. This is philosophically beautiful, but practically disastrous. The priests go home more confused than ever, and for a few terrifying moments, the sun seems to wobble in its celestial trek. This issue of doctrinal drift is something religious scholars find fascinating. How does a religion maintain its core beliefs and rituals over centuries without a sacred, written text to anchor them? Before the codification of the pyramid texts or the Book of the Dead, what prevented Egyptian religion from splintering into 1,000 different local cults, each with its own version of the afterlife? Some historians argue that a powerful, centralized priesthood and strong oral traditions were enough to maintain a surprising degree of consistency. They suggest that the training of priests was so rigorous, the memorization so exact, that the core tenets remained stable for a very long time. Others believe that the reality was much messier. They argue that Egyptian religion was incredibly fluid and diverse, and the idea of a single, unified Egyptian mythology as a modern simplification. The myths we read today are the versions that happen to be written down and preserved, the winners of a long, unrecorded theological war. ARCE had witnesses all of this. She sees the frustration of the gods, the anger of the villagers, the confusion of the priests. She sees our memory, for all its beauty and power, is like water. It is fluid. It shifts. It evaporates. It is not a foundation upon which you can build a kingdom, or a system of law, or a stable universe. She watches as a royal architect tries to explain the complex plan for a new temple to a team of builders, using only hand gestures and piles of rocks to represent pylons. The project is already a mess. The need is no longer theoretical. It is urgent. The world doesn't just need a tool to remember. It needs a tool to agree. The frustration in the gods' judgment hall, the rising tension between the squabbling villagers, it all dissolves into the gentle, rhythmic sound of lapping water. You are with Seshat now, but she has left the clamor of the divine court behind. She is seeking clarity not from the minds of the gods, but from the quiet wisdom of the natural world. She is standing alone on the banks of the Nile, just as the great annual flood, the ARCE, is beginning to recede. The air is thick with the smell of rich, wet silt and new life. The ground at her feet is a vast, muddy canvas. The flood has wiped the slate clean, erasing all the old property lines and landmarks that caused so much trouble. But, as she looks, she sees that the receding water has left its own story etched into the mud. You are witnessing the moment of inspiration, the core idea that would change everything. She sees the delicate, branching patterns left by the retreating rivulets of water. Like tiny, intricate trees, she sees the perfect, geometric cracks that form in the mud as it dries under the hot sun. She sees the distinct, sharp print left by the foot of a heron that has just waded past. Each of these is a mark, a temporary, natural sign that holds information. The pattern of the cracks speaks of the sun's heat in the soil's composition. The heron's footprint tells a story what kind of bird it was, which way it was going, how long ago it passed. These marks are not language. They have no grammar, no syntax, but they are a form of silent, unintentional writing. Nature, she realizes, is constantly recording its own history. This is the foundational idea representation. The footprint is not the heron, but it stands for the heron. The crack in the mud is not the sun's heat, but it is the result of it, a physical sign of an invisible force. She is making the conceptual leap from an object to its symbol. She walks further, into a thicket of papyrus, reeds growing tall and green at the water's edge. This is a plant that will become synonymous with her invention, the very foundation of recorded knowledge for millennia. She pulls a single, long, triangular stalk. The outer green rind is tough, but the pith inside is soft and fibrous. She sees how it is made of layers, thin sheets that can be peeled apart. Her mind is working, seeing not just a plant, but potential. This brings you to a wonderfully specific, niche detail of Egyptian botany and its connection to their worldview. The papyrus plant wasn't just useful, it was deeply symbolic. A thicket of papyrus was seen as a miniature model of the primordial world, a fertile marsh where life first emerged from the waters of chaos. The triangular stalk was thought to represent the shape of a pyramid, and its feathery head, the rays of the sun. In picking this reed, Seshat is not just choosing a random plant. She is choosing one that is already imbued with the deepest meanings of creation, order, and life itself. Her attention then turns to the sky. As dusk falls, the stars begin to emerge, first one by one, then in their countless thousands. They are not random. They are arranged in patterns, constellations that wheel across the sky in a predictable, eternal cycle. The star we know as Sirius, which the Egyptians called Soptet, always reappears in the dawn sky just before the Nile begins to flood. The stars are a celestial calendar, a cosmic clock. They are nature's way of marking the passage of time on a grand scale. The gods and mortals have been observing this for eons, holding the knowledge in their memories. But Seshat now sees it differently. The pattern of the stars is a form of divine writing on the blackboard of the night sky. It's a message that repeats itself, year after year, a permanent record available to anyone who knows how to read it. This is a point of ongoing scholarly discussion. Did early writing systems around the world emerge, first from accounting the need to track goods, or from astronomy and religious ritual, the need to track time and sacred events? In Mesopotamia, the evidence points strongly towards accounting, but in Egypt, the lines are more blurred. The earliest known writing appears in the tombs of kings and deals with royal rituals, names, and titles, but it also appears on labels for jars of oil and linen. Was the primary impulse sacred or secular? Did Seshat's revelation come from the practical need to mark a wind jar, or from the sacred need to record a king's journey to the stars? The truth is, these two worlds were not separate for the Egyptians. The king's power was divine, and the prosperity of the kingdom, measured in jars of oil, was a reflection of that divine order. Accounting was a sacred act. Seshat stands there, under the star-filled sky, the muddy bank of the Nile at her feet, a single papyrus reed in her hand. She has seen how nature uses marks to record events, how it uses patterns to store information, and how it uses cycles to measure time. The tools are all here. The concepts are clear in her mind. Now, she just has to do something no one has ever done before. She has to do it on purpose. The vast, silent university of nature, the muddy riverbank. The starry sky begins to fade. The grand, abstract ideas of representation and symbolism now need a crucible, a moment of execution. You are with Seshat, as she returns to a place of quiet concentration, perhaps a secluded chamber within a nascent temple, away from the chatter of gods and mortals. The air is still and warm. The time for observation is over. The time for creation has come. She has the raw materials she gathered from the riverbank. She takes the long stalk of papyrus, but she doesn't try to write on its fibrous interior yet. The surface is too soft, too absorbent. The idea of paper hasn't quite formed. Instead, she looks at its smooth, green outer rind. It's a clean surface, a blank slate. She needs a tool. She picks up a sharp sliver of flint. Its edge honed by a craftsman god. It feels cool and solid in her hand. This is the moment, the culmination of all her frustration, her observation, her divine insight. It is a moment of profound, quiet revolution. You lean in, watching as she presses the point of the flint against the green skin of the papyrus reed. She doesn't write a word. She doesn't draw a picture. She makes a single, straight line. This is the first mark, the primordial act of intentional recording. It is the core of our story. The single, deliberate scratch is more revolutionary than any battle between gods or any miracle of creation that has come before. Why? Because it is an idea, a given physical form. It is a thought that has been rescued from the fleeting, internal world of the mind and made permanent, or at least semi-permanent in the external, shared world. It is the birth of data. She looks at the line. It's clean. It's clear. It exists. Now, what does it mean? She decides. This line, she determines, will represent one, a single unit of something. One day, one person, one jar of beer. Its meaning is not inherent. It is assigned. This is the second great leap to convention. The agreement that a specific mark will have a specific, shared meaning. She makes another scratch next to it. 2 lines, 2 units, then a third. She has just invented the tally system, the most basic and universal form of accounting, a system that would be used by shepherds and shopkeepers for the next 5,000 years. It is simple, it is intuitive, and it is infinitely better than memory. Now you witness her pushing this idea further. This brings us to a beautiful, niche detail about the development of symbolic thought. She needs to record something more complex than just numbers. She thinks back to the heron's footprint in the mud. The footprint wasn't the heron, but it was inextricably linked to it. She takes her flint and, on a flat piece of wet clay this time, she tries to draw the shape of a heron's foot. It's clumsy at first, but she perseveres. She scratches the 3 forward facing toes, the 1 backward facing toe. Then she draws something else beside a simple wavy line. mimicking the ripples of the Nile. She points to the two symbols, footprint, water, heron by the water. She has just created a sentence. It's a rudimentary form of what linguists call proto-minus writing. It's not a full language, as it can't express abstract ideas or complex grammar, but it can record a concrete observation. It is a picture minus story, a rebus. This leap from tally marks to pictograms is a subject of endless fascination and debate among archaeologists and linguists. Did this happen slowly, over many centuries of gradual abstraction, or was it a more rapid discovery, a eureka moment by a single person or a small group of innovators? The Egyptian myths, of course, credit a divine source like Seshat or Thoth, framing it as a single, brilliant invention. This is likely a simplification of a much more complex historical process. However, scholars still argue about the precise catalyst. Was it the need for royal propaganda to record the name of a king and his great deeds, or the needs of a growing bureaucracy to label goods and keep inventories? The earliest Egyptian writing we have contains elements of both. On the famous Narmer pellet, a ceremonial object dating to around 3100 BCE, we see a mixture of realistic depictions of the king smiting his enemies, alongside true hieroglyphs that phonetically spell out his name. This suggests that from the very beginning, writing served this dual purpose: to tell a story and to record a specific piece of data. The narrative and the spreadsheet were born as twins. Seshat looks at the marks she has made, the simple lines for numbers, the picture of a footprint, the wavy line for water. They are crude, they are imperfect, but they are a stone. They are a new kind of magic, more subtle than the grain, spoken hikar of the other gods, but potentially more powerful. It is the magic of permanence. She has taken a thought from her mind and given it a body. It will not fade when she stops thinking about it. It will not vanish when the sound of her voice dies away. It will stay. Then with that one simple realization, the quiet goddess of measurement has just armed herself with the tool that will build the future. The simple, profound satisfaction of that first scratch on the reed begins to expand, to blossom. Seshat holds the key now, the foundational concept of turning thought into form, and she starts to apply it to the world around her with a quiet, systematic intensity. You are with her as she moves through the newly created world, no longer just observing it, but cataloging it, giving each piece of reality its own unique, permanent symbol. She is building a dictionary of existence. This is the great, painstaking work of creating the sacred writing, the Medu-Net-Jer, what the Greeks would later call hieroglyphs. It is the central, defining act of her divine career. She doesn't invent these symbols out of thin air. She finds them in the world that Thoth has dreamed Andro has illuminated. You watch as she looks at the sun, the source of all light. How to represent it? She draws a simple circle. Then, to make it unmistakable, she adds a dot in the center. It is clean, iconic, perfect. This becomes the hieroglyph for Ra, the sun god, but also for the word day and the concept of light. She has created a multi-minus layered symbol that is both concrete and abstract. She turns her gaze to the creatures of the Nile. She sees a horned viper slithering through the sand. She captures its essence in a single, fluid drawing, a sinuous body with two horns on its head. This symbol becomes the sound F. She sees an owl, sitting silent and watchful on a branch, its great eyes facing forward. She draws its unmistakable frontal silhouette. This becomes the sound M. This is a crucial, evolutionary step. She is no longer just drawing pictures of things, pictograms. She is using pictures to represent sounds, phonograms. This is the key that unlocks the ability to write any word, not just the names of things you can draw. This is a niche concept that is fundamental to understanding Egyptian writing. Hieroglyphs are not a simple 1-to-1 picture language like Emo.js. It's a complex, hybrid system. Some symbols, like the one for sun, represent a whole word. These are called ideograms. Other symbols, like the owl, represent a single consonant sound. Still others represent a combination of 2 or 3 consonants. It's a rebus, an alphabet, and a picture book all rolled into one. and learning to read it was a life's work. You see her create hundreds of these signs, each one a miniature work of art, distilled from the essence of a living thing. The leg of a quail for the W sound, I read shelter for the H sound, the shape of a human mouth for the R sound. The very act of choosing these symbols tells you so much about the world of the ancient Egyptians. The animals and objects that became letters were the ones that were most common, most important, most resonant to them. There is no hieroglyph for a penguin or a pine tree. The alphabet itself is a map of their environment. This process of developing a full writing system from simple pictograms raises a huge, and still debated, question in the world of archaeology and linguistics. Was this an independent invention? We know that around the same time, perhaps a little earlier, the Sumerians in Mesopotamia were developing their own writing system. Cuneiform. Cuneiform was very different abstract, wedge-shaped marks pressed into clay, but the core idea of using symbols to represent words and sounds was the same. So, did the Egyptians get the idea of writing from Mesopotamia? Was there a single traveler, a merchant who journeyed between the two great river civilizations, who brought back the revolutionary concept, hey, you know, those guys over in Sumer had this amazing trick for remembering who owes them a sheet. This is the stimulus diffusion theory, that Egypt didn't borrow the specific letters, but they borrowed the core concept of writing itself, and then developed their own unique system. Or did they invent it entirely on their own? A parallel evolution happening independently. The evidence is tantalizingly ambiguous. The timing is very close, but the forms of the two scripts are completely different. There is no smoking gun, no early Egyptian tablet that looks vaguely like a Sumerian one. Scholars lean towards the stimulus diffusion theory, but the debate is fierce and ongoing. It's a question of whether this monumental leap of human intellect happened once or twice. For now, you ignore the scholarly squabbles of the future. You simply watch as Seshat at her work. She is not a goddess of thunderous pronouncements. She is a goddess of quiet observation and meticulous craft. She is building a bridge between the world of things and the world of ideas. With each new symbol she creates, she is making reality more solid, more understandable, more permanent. She is giving the fleeting thoughts of gods and mortals a place to live, a home carved out of the very shape of the world itself. Now that Seshat has this beautiful, robust system of symbols, this divine dictionary of reality, she faces a new, intensely practical problem. How do you actually use it? A symbol carved into a rock is permanent, but it's not portable. A mark scratched in the mud is temporary. She needs a technology that is both durable and convenient. She needs to invent the tools of the writer. You are with her again at the edge of the Nile, the great, giving artery of her civilization. She is not looking at the grand vistas this time. Her focus is small, intimate. She is looking at the materials at hand and re-imaging them. This is the story of how she perfected the ancient world's killer app, the pen, the ink, and the paper. First, the paper. She returns to the papyrus reed, the plant that gave her the first spark of inspiration. She knows its fibrous interior is the key. You watch as she, or the humans she inspires, develops a brilliant, factory-like process. Stalks are harvested. The tough green rind is peeled away, revealing the sticky, white pith within. This pith is then sliced into thin, ribbon-like strips. These strips are laid down on a flat, wet surface into layers, one horizontal, one vertical, overlapping like a woven mat. Then, they begin to beat. They pound them out with wooden mallets. This is the crucial step. The pounding breaks down the plant's cellular structure, releasing a natural, blue-like sap. This sap bonds the two layers of fibers together into a single, cohesive sheet. The sheet is then pressed under a heavy weight to squeeze out the water, and finally left to dry in the hot Egyptian sun. The result is a marvel of ancient technology, a sheet of papyrus. It's lightweight, flexible, and surprisingly strong. Its surface is smooth enough to write on, a pale, cream-colored canvas waiting for a thought. The Egyptians would have a virtual monopoly on this technology for thousands of years. Now she needs something to write with, A sharp piece of flint is good for scratching, but it's clumsy. She needs something that can deliver fluid light. She looks again at the reeds growing by the water, not the thick papyrus stalks, but a thinner, more common species. She plucks one. It's hollow. She uses her knife to cut the tip at a sharp, diagonal angle, creating a point. Then, she makes a tiny, vertical slit in that point. When she dips this into a liquid, the slit will act as a tiny reservoir, holding a drop of ink and releasing it in a smooth, controlled flow through the principle of capillary action. She has just invented the reed pen, the ancestor of the quill, the fountain pen, and every pen you have ever held. But what will the ink be? It needs to be dark, permanent, and easy to make. This is where you find a wonderfully mundane and ingenious little detail. The solution is found in the hearth of every home. She takes the fine, black soot from the bottom of a cooking pot, pure carbon, and scrapes it into a small bowl. She mixes this with a binder, a touch of plant gum or animal glue to make it stick to the papyrus, and then thins it with water until it has the consistency of paint. She has created black ink, a recipe so effective and simple that it would barely change for the next 3 millennia. She now has all the components: the lightweight papyrus sheet, the elegant reed pen, the simple, dark ink. You watch as she assembles her first writing kit, a wooden palette with 2 depressions carved in it, one for a cake of black ink, one for a cake of reed ink made from ground ochre, for highlighting important passages, a small pot of water for thinning the ink, a bundle of freshly cut reed pens. The scribe's kit would become the iconic to love the educated class, a status symbol that showed its owner was a master of the most powerful technology of the age. The development of this complete technological package, paper, pen, and ink, raises a question that historians of technology love to ponder: the relationship between software and hardware. In this analogy, the hieroglyphic script is the software, the code, the operating system, but the Papyrus-making pen technology is the hardware it runs on. Which one was more important? Some would argue that the script itself, the intellectual breakthrough of symbolic representation, is the true innovation. The physical tools are just a delivery mechanism. But other historians argue that this is short-sighted. A brilliant script that can only be carved slowly onto stone walls is a technology with limited reach. It is the invention of a cheap, portable medium like papyrus that truly unleashes its power. It's the hardware that allows the software to go viral. Without papyrus, there could be no letters, no contracts, no literature, no libraries. The invention of the medium is just as revolutionary as the invention of the message. As Seshat looks at her completed kit, it is a thing of simple, functional beauty. She dips her new pen into her new ink and touches it to her new paper. The line she makes is smooth, black, and effortless. She can now write as fast as she can think. The final barrier between the mind and the page has fallen. The quiet satisfaction of having the perfect writing toolkit is not enough for a practical goddess like Seshat. A technology is only as good as what you do with it. And so, you follow her as she leaves the world of invention and enters the world of application. The first problem she decides to tackle is one of the biggest and most fundamental to the survival of the new Egyptian state, the harvest. You find yourself standing beside a massive, sun-baked mud brick granary. It's the size of a large temple, a testament to the agricultural genius of the Nile Valley. The air is thick with the dusty, sweet smell of barley and wheat, and the sound of hundreds of workers hauling heavy sacks of grain. This is the Fort Knox of ancient Egypt. The grain stored here is not just food. It is the nation's wealth, the currency used to pay soldiers, craftsmen, and priests. Controlling it is controlling the kingdom. But there's a problem. A high-ranking official, a vizier, stands frowning, trying to figure out exactly how much grain has been brought in from the southern provinces. He's using the old method. He has a team of rememberers, men who are trained to memorize numbers. One man shouts, 40 sacks from the estate of Canaan. Another man makes a knot in a rope. The vizier tries to keep a running tally in his head, but the process is slow, noisy, and prone to catastrophic errors. Did that man say 40 sacks? Or 50? Was that not for the barley shipment or the wheat? A small miscalculation here could lead to a food shortage in a city, or a misallocation of wages for an entire legion of troops. This is the moment Seshat intervenes. This is the mainstream historical point. Writing's first and most powerful application was in accounting and bureaucracy. She approaches the frazzled vizier and presents him with her tools: a fresh sheet of papyrus, a reed pen, and a pot of ink. She shows him how to make the simple symbols for the different types of grain. She teaches him the hieroglyphs for the numbers: a single stroke for 1, a heel bone for 10, a coiled rope for 100, a lotus flower for 1,000. The vizier is skeptical at first, but he is desperate. He begins to write. He draws a column for barley and a column for wheat. As a shipment arrives, a scribe next to him calmly dips his pen in the ink and makes a note. A state of care name on lotus. Lotus, coiled rope, heel bone, heel bone, heel bone, heel bone. 1,140 sacks of wheat. The information is clear, silent, and permanent. At the end of the day, the scribe can simply add up the columns. The total is exact. There is no argument, no confusion. The vizier looks at the neat rows of symbols on the papyrus, and a slow smile spreads across his face. He is looking at the birth of the spreadsheet. This new technology allows for a level of economic control that was previously unimaginable, and this leads to a quirky and very human defect: the invention of the receipt. You can imagine a farmer delivering his grain tax. The granary scribe records the amount and then, using a broken piece of pottery and OS tracker, the ancient world sticky note, he scrawls a quick confirmation: paid in full. Farmer NAKHT. He hands this to the farmer. This little shard of pottery is now proof. If another tax collector comes around later, the farmer can produce his receipt and be safe. It's a small thing, but it's a revolution in personal security and legal accountability. The birth of this powerful new accounting system, however, raises a profound and ongoing debate among historians and political scientists. Did writing create the bureaucratic state, or did the needs of a growing bureaucratic state create writing? It's another chicken minus and minus egg problem, much like the one with buttonholes and fashion. The first argument is that the invention of writing was the key enabling technology that allowed complex, centralized states to form. Without the ability to keep accurate records, send clear long minus distance commands, and create a standardized legal code, you simply can't manage a large kingdom. Writing, in this view, is the software that runs the hardware of civilization. But the opposing argument is equally strong. It suggests that the process was the other way around. As early societies in Egypt grew larger and more complex, with a powerful king needing to manage a large territory, chronic taxes, and field an army, the pressures on the old memory-based systems became unbearable. This created an intense, practical need for a new information technology. The state's administrative demands, in this view, were the driving force that spurred the invention and refinement of writing. The bureaucracy wasn't the child of writing, it was the father of it. The debate continues, but it's clear the two forces were locked in a powerful feedback loop, each driving the other forward. You watch as the scribes, newly trained in Thoth, begin to proliferate. They sit at the gates of temples, at the docks of the river, in the storehouses of the army. They are counting, listing, and recording everything. The amount of tribute from Nubia, the number of bricks needed for a pyramid, the lineage of the pharaoh's sacred bulls. With each stroke of their pen, they are weaving a web of data, a net of information that allows the kingdom to know itself, to control itself, and to endure. Seshat's quiet invention is no longer a curiosity. It is the very backbone of the most powerful nation on earth. The dusty, meticulously organized world of the royal granary begins to dissolve, and you find yourself once again on the fertile banks of the Nile. But the mood is different now. The annual flood has just receded, and the land is a blank canvas of rich, black mud. The life-giving waters that ensure Egypt's prosperity have also created a massive, Yearly headache, they have washed away all the property markers. Every single year, the entire country needs to be surveyed. You see the familiar scene of two farmers arguing, gesturing wildly over a patch of indistinguishable mud. One swears his field extended to a now vanished tamarisk tree. The other is certain it ended at a clump of reeds that was washed away weeks ago. This is the chaos that Seshat must now bring to order, and she will do it with a tool that is deceptively simple, yet mathematically profound and uttered rope. She is known by another title, the Mistress of the House of Books, but she has another, more ancient and perhaps more fundamental one, the Lady of Builders, and in this role, she carries the tools of the surveyor. You watch as she directs her specially trained priests, the Hogdonebtai, or rope stretchers. They carry a long rope that has been carefully marked with 13 knots, tied at perfectly equal intervals. This is the main historical point. The ancient Egyptians used this simple tool to perform sophisticated geometry. You watch them work. To create a perfect right angle, the cornerstone of all architecture and land surveying, they take this rope and peg it into the ground to form a triangle. But not just any triangle. They create one with sides that are 3, 4, and 5 units long respectively. This 3 for 5 triangle, as a direct application of what we would later call the Pythagorean theorem, always creates a perfect 90-degree angle between the two shorter sides. It's a magical, mathematical truth, and it allows them to establish the boundaries of the farmer's fields with divine, unquestionable precision. They are not just estimating, they are creating a perfect, geometric order on the chaotic land. The farmers fall silent, watching in awe, as the rope stretchers lay out a perfect rectangle on the land that was, moments before, a source of bitter dispute. The boundary is no longer a matter of memory or opinion. It is a matter of mathematics. It is the will of the gods, made manifest in the tautness of a rope. This practical application of geometry leads us to a quirky and specific detail of Seshat's domain, her role as the divine record keeper of captured goods and foreign prisoners. After a successful military campaign, the pharaoh would preside over a ceremony where the spoils of war were counted. You can picture the scene: thousands of prisoners of war are paraded before the throne, and a scribe sits at a small table. But how do you count a moving, chaotic crowd of thousands? The accountant of captives would, according to some reliefs, perform a grim but practical task. He would count not the people, but their severed hands or other body parts, piled in a heap, and next to him, you would see Seshat, a papyrus scroll in her hand, calmly recording the final, gruesome tally. It's a chilling reminder that the invention of accounting and record keeping wasn't just about grain and taxes. It was also a tool for quantifying the brutal realities of war and conquest. The Egyptians' stunning proficiency in practical geometry, as demonstrated by the rope stretchers, has led to a long and sometimes heated debate among historians of science and mathematics. This is our point of academic controversy. We know from their architecture and their land records that the Egyptians were masters of practical geometry. They could calculate the area of a rectangle, a triangle, and a circle with a surprisingly accurate value for pi. But did they understand the abstract, theoretical principles behind their methods? Did they have a theorem in the Greek sense? A universal proof that a 3 for 5 triangle always produces a right angle, and an understanding of why? Or did they simply know that it was a practical trick that worked every time? The evidence we have, mostly from mathematical papyri, consists of lists of specific problems and their solutions. If you have a field of this size and this shape, here is how you calculate the area. There are no abstract proofs, no general theories. The traditional view is that Egyptian mathematics was purely practical, a kind of cookbook of useful recipes without any of the theoretical underpinning that the Greeks, like Pythagoras and Euclid, would later develop. But some modern historians argue this is an unfair, Eurocentric view. They suggest we are judging Egyptian knowledge by a Greek standard. Perhaps the Egyptians simply saw no need to write down their abstract theories. Maybe the theory was part of a secret, oral tradition passed down among priests and scribes, Or maybe they just considered the practical demonstration to be proof enough. The debate essentially questions what it means to know mathematics. Is it about being able to solve a problem, or about being able to explain the abstract principle that governs the solution? You watch as the last field is measured, its corners marked with newly placed stones. Order has been restored to the land. Seshat has taken the abstract beauty of geometry and used it to solve a messy, human problem. She has shown that her knowledge is not just for the gods. It is for the good of the people. And now, having mastered the measurement of the flat earth, she turns her eyes to a new, more ambitious challenge building for eternity. The muddy fields, now neatly divided by the undeniable logic of geometry, fade from view. The scale of Seshat's ambition is about to take a literal, vertical leap. You are no longer concerned with the horizontal plane of the earth, but with rising up to meet the gods. You are standing with a newly crowned pharaoh on a dusty, empty patch of desert. The king has a divine mandate to build a home for the gods, a temple that will anchor the cosmos and ensure the stability of his reign, but he has no idea how to start. This is not a farmer's hut. This is a house for eternity, and it must be perfect. He turns to Seshat, the lady of builders. She stands ready, holding her two most powerful tools, the knotted rope of the severe and the reed pen of the scribe. The king and the goddess together will now perform one of the most ancient and sacred rituals in Egyptian history, the stretching of the cord ceremony for the foundation of a new temple. This is our central historical point. You watch as Seshat and the pharaoh, each take an end of the sacred, knotted rope. They walk to the center of the consecrated ground, but they are not just looking at the earth, they are looking at the sky. Seshat directs the king's gaze towards the northern heavens, to the constellation we call the Big Dipper. She shows him how to use two of its stars as a sight-minus line to find the unmoving, eternal point of the north celestial pole. Using this perfect, cosmic alignment, they orient the foundation of the temple. They stretch the cord taut, creating the first baseline, perfectly aligned with the cardinal directions of the universe. The temple will not just be a building on the earth, it will be a mirror of the heavens, its very foundations locked into the cosmic order. This ceremony, depicted in temple reliefs for thousands of years, shows the deep, inseparable connection the Egyptians saw between architecture, astronomy, and divine will. Once the orientation is fixed, Seshat gets to work on her next great invention, the architectural plan. It's not enough to have a general idea of a temple. The builders need precise instructions. You follow her into a temporary workshop on the site. She unrolls a large, fresh sheet of papers. She is no longer just writing words or numbers. She is drawing to scale. Using her knowledge of geometry, she creates a ground plan, a perfect, top-minus-down view of the temple. This is where you see a quirky and brilliant little detail of the Egyptian technical mind. She creates a grid. She draws a series of perfectly spaced parallel lines, both horizontal and vertical, across the entire papyrus sheet. This grid system allows her to maintain perfect proportions. The Holy of Holies will be exactly 3 squares wide and 5 squares long. The great pylon at the entrance will have a base that is 10 squares across. This grid allows the design to be easily scaled up. A builder on the site can create a much larger grid on the actual ground using ropes and pegs, and then transfer her small drawing to its full, monumental size, square by square. With absolute accuracy, she has invented the blueprint. This invention of gridded architectural drawings allows for a new level of complexity and precision. It ensures that the temple will not just be big, but also symmetrical, harmonious, and built according to a sacred, mathematical canon of proportions that reflects the perfection of the gods. The existence of these detailed plans, however, leads to a historical debate that has fueled countless speculative theories, especially concerning the Great Pyramid of Giza. We know the Egyptians were master builders. The precision of the pyramids and later temples is astonishing even by modern standards, but the how is still a matter of intense scholarly debate. The mainstream archaeological view, based on decades of evidence from workers' villages, quarries, and surviving papyrus, is that the Egyptians accomplished these feats through brilliant project management, an immense and well-minus organized labor force, and the clever use of simple tools like ropes, levers, ramps, and sledges. But the sheer scale and perfection of the work has led some to question this. This is where you enter the world of alternative theories. Could they have had some lost form of technology? Did they possess a more advanced understanding of mathematics than the surviving papyri let on? Was there a secret, esoteric knowledge known only to a select few priests and architects? This debate often gets pulled into the realm of pure fantasy, but the core question is a valid one for historians of science and technology. Is there a gap between the Egyptians' known technological toolkit and their observable architectural achievements? The mainstream consensus says no. There is no gap, just a level of skill and organization that is hard for us to fully comprehend. But the question lingers, a testament to the enduring awe that their buildings inspire. As Seshat rolls up her completed blueprint, it is a masterpiece of technical drawing, a perfect fusion of her skills as a scribe and a surveyor. She has given the pharaoh more than just a building plan. She has given him a guarantee that his temple will be stable, that it will be beautiful, and that it will be aligned with the eternal rhythms of the cosmos. The Lady of Builders has laid the foundation for a civilization of stone that will last for millennia. The vast, sun-drenched construction site of the temple begins to recede. The scent of stone dust and the shouts of builders are replaced by the cool, silent air of the deep desert night. The massive stone walls of the temple are impressive, but Seshat knows that a building is only a vessel. What truly matters is what happens inside it, and for that, you need to understand time itself. You are with her now as she undertakes one of her most crucial and intellectually ambitious projects, creating a reliable calendar. She is standing on the flat roof of a temple, far from the light of any cooking fires. Above her, the sky is a breathtaking canopy of stars, a spectacle of celestial glitter that is almost unimaginable in our modern, light-polluted world. The Egyptians have been watching this sky for centuries, using the stars to guide them. They know that the reappearance of the star Sirius just before dawn heralds the coming of the Nile flood. They know that the moon goes through its phases in a regular, repeating cycle. But these are observations, not a system. It's time to build a clockwork model of the heavens. This is the main historical point. The Egyptians, under the guidance of Seshat, created one of the world's first and most successful solar calendars. It was a masterpiece of observational astronomy and practical mathematics. You watch as she, and the priests she instructs, begin the work. They track the sun's position against the backdrop of the stars day after day. They note the precise moment of the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, and begin to count. They count 365 days until the sun returns to that same spot. They have measured the length of the solar year, but 365 is an awkward number. She needs to organize it. She divides the year into 12 months. Each month is given 30 days. This gives her 360 days. A neat, round number that is easy to work with. But what about the 5 leftover days? This is where you see a wonderfully creative, mythological solution to a mathematical problem. Seshat and the gods declare that these 5 extra days do not belong to any month. They are special, epigomenal days that stand outside the normal calendar. They are set aside at the very end of the year as the birthdays of the 5 great gods Osiris, Horus, Set, Isis, and Nephthys. It's a brilliant move, turning a messy mathematical remainder into a national religious festival. It's the ancient world's first and most divinely sanctioned long weekend. But Seshat is a goddess of precision, and she knows her calendar has a tiny flaw. This is a fashionably specific detail that would have huge consequences much later in history. She knows that the true solar year isn't exactly 365 days. It's closer to 365 and a quarter days. Her calendar, by ignoring that extra quarter of a day, is going to drift every 4 years. It will be off by 1 full day relative to the actual season. It doesn't sound like much, but over a century, that's a 25 day drift. The official summer months would eventually happen in the middle of winter. This leads to a quiet, but profound, historical debate. Did the Egyptians know about this quarter-day era? The overwhelming consensus among Egyptologists is yes. They were far too good at astronomy not to have noticed it. They could see their star-based so thick calendar and their official 365-day civil calendars slowly drifting apart. So why didn't they fix it? Why not add a leap day every 4 years, as we do? We don't know for sure, but there are several compelling theories. The first is religious conservatism. The 365-day calendar, with its 5 sacred birthdays at the end, was a divine institution. To tamper with it, to add an extra day, would be to meddle with the cosmic order established by the gods. It would have been seen as incredibly unlucky, even heretical. Another theory is bureaucratic inertia. Imagine trying to explain to the tax collectors and temple administrators across the entire kingdom that this year is going to have 366 days. It would have thrown the entire administrative and religious schedule into chaos. It may have simply been easier to accept the slow, predictable drift than to try and implement such a radical correction. The problem wasn't a lack of knowledge, but a cultural and political resistance to change. It would take the arrival of the Romans, specifically Julius Caesar, guided by an Alexandrian astronomer, to finally introduce the concept of the leap year and create the Julian calendar that is the direct ancestor of our own. For now, Seshat has created a system that is elegant, practical, and good enough to run a civilization for 3,000 years. She has taken the chaotic, flowing river of time and divided it into measurable, predictable units. With her new calendar, the pharaoh can know exactly when to plant the crops, when to hold the great religious festivals, and how to measure the length of his own reign. With her pen, she has recorded the rhythms of the sun and the stars, giving the gift of predictable time to the land of Egypt. The vast, starry laboratory of the night sky begins to fade, and you are brought back down to earth, into a room filled with the quiet, rustling sound of papyrus. Seshat's inventions: writing, accounting, surveying, architecture, astronomy have been fantastically successful. Too successful, in fact. Her work has created a new and entirely unforeseen problem: a data explosion. You are standing in what serves as the royal archive, a chamber deep within a temple or palace, and it is overflowing. Stacks of papyrus scrolls are everywhere, leaning against the walls, tiled in corners, threatening to tumble down in a dusty avalanche. Each scroll is a discrete piece of information, a tax record from a remote province, a legal decision from a decade ago, a detailed inventory of a temple's treasury, a copy of a treaty with the Hittites, a blueprint for a canal that was never built. This is the main point: the sheer volume of recorded knowledge was becoming a crisis of storage and retrieval. The scribes are overwhelmed. You watch as a high-ranking priest frantically searches for a specific scroll containing a religious incantation needed for a ceremony that starts in an hour. He pulls one scroll from a pile. It's a list of copper shipments from Sinai. He grabs another. It's a decades-old record of a border dispute. The information he needs is in here somewhere, but it is effectively lost in the clutter. Knowledge that cannot be found is no better than knowledge that was never recorded in the first place. The kingdom is in danger of drowning in its own memory. This is the birth of information overload, an anxiety we tend to think of as uniquely modern, a product of the internet age, but you are witnessing its ancient origins. The problem is no longer about creating information, but about managing it. And this leads to a wonderfully specific and nerdy little detail of scribal culture: the development of metadata. Seshat, observing the chaos, inspires a simple but brilliant solution. She teaches the scribes to add a tag to the end of each scroll. This tag, a small strip of papyrus or leather, would hang down when the scroll was rolled up and stored. On it, the scribe would write a short summary of the scroll's contents. It was, in essence, a title and a subject heading. For example, a tag might read tax records, year 15 of His Majesty, Ramses II, southern province of Abydos. Now, Instead of unrolling every scroll to see what's inside, the frantic priest can simply scan the tags. He can go to the section where the religious texts are stored and look for the one labeled incantations for the opening of the mouth ceremony. Seshat has just invented the file name, the abstract, the keyword search. She has created data about data. But, even with this innovation, the physical problem remains. Papyrus is bulky. Where do you put it all? How do you organize it so that related information can be found together? This is a question that historians of information science and librarians find fascinating. The physical layout of an archive reflects the intellectual priorities of a civilization. How did the Egyptians categorize their knowledge? Based on the surviving labels and the layout of the few archives we found, the debate continues. Did they organize by date, creating a chronological record of the kingdom? This would be useful for historians. Or did they organize by subject, all the tax records in one place, all the legal documents in another, all the religious texts in a third? This would be more useful for the working bureaucracy. Or was it organized by geography, with all the records from a specific province bundled together? The likely answer is that they used a complex, hybrid system that we don't fully understand. But the very question reveals the intellectual challenge they faced. Creating a system to organize all human knowledge is not a simple clerical task. It is a profound philosophical one. You have to decide what is most important. Does a legal decision belong under law, or under the year it was made? Does a medical text that is also a magical spell belong under science or religion? These are not just administrative questions. They are questions about how you see the world and how its different parts relate to each other. As Seshat looks at the chaotic room, the scribes lost in a sea of their own success, she sees the papyrus scrolls not as a burden, but as a treasure. This is the collected wisdom of her entire civilization. It cannot be left in dusty, disorganized piles. It needs a home. It needs a system. It needs a place built specifically for the preservation and study of knowledge. Her mind, which has already conceived of calendars and blueprints, now begins to sketch out the plan for her grandest, most enduring creation. The dusty, cluttered archive room, with its piles of priceless but inaccessible knowledge, begins to transform in your mind's eye. The chaos gives way to a vision of order, the dim light to a vision of cool, columned halls. Seshat is no longer just solving immediate problems. She is thinking about the future, about posterity. She understands that a kingdom's true strength lies not in its armies or its gold, but in its collective wisdom, and that wisdom needs a fortress. You are witnessing the birth of a grand idea inside her divine mind. She is formulating the concept for what the Egyptians would call the Papyrus-making, the House of Life. This is the central point of this chapter. The House of Life was not just a storage facility. It was an institution, a combination of university, scripture, library, and magic laboratory, all rolled into one. It was a place dedicated not just to keeping records, but to studying them, copying them, and creating new knowledge from them. In Seshat's vision, this is not a single, grand building in the capital city. It is a network. Every major temple complex across the land of Egypt will have its own House of Life. This decentralized model is a stroke of genius. It ensures that if one temple is destroyed or one city falls, the collected knowledge of the civilization is not lost. There will always be backups. It's the ancient world's first distributed information network. She imagines the physical space. It will be built of stone to protect its precious contents from fire and the elements. Its halls will be lined with hundreds, perhaps thousands, of small, square niches carved into the walls. Each niche is a perfect, custom built home for a single papyrus scroll. The scrolls will no longer be in messy piles, but stored neatly, each with its identifying tag hanging down, easy to read and retrieve. But who will work here? This is where Seshat envisions a new class of intellectual guardians. The House of Life will be staffed by the most elite scribes in the kingdom, not the clerks who just count grain, but scholar-priests who are masters of multiple disciplines. You see them in her mind's eye: a scribe who is also a physician, carefully copying the medical papyrus that detail surgical procedures and magical healing spells. You see another who is an astronomer, updating the celestial charts and calculating the calendar. You see a third who is a master of sacred literature, painstakingly creating a new, beautifully illustrated copy of the Book of the Dead for a royal burial. This leads to a quirky and specific detail about the activities inside the House of Life. It wasn't all quiet, scholarly contemplation. It was also considered a place of immense magical power. The Egyptians believed that the act of writing, of using the sacred hieroglyphs, was a creative force. The texts stored in the House of Life, especially the religious and magical ones, were thought to generate a powerful aura. It was here that priests would come to recharge sacred amulets by placing them near ancient texts. It was also here that the most secret and powerful rituals were developed and rehearsed. The library was not just a place of knowledge, it was a magical power plant. The very nature and function of the House of Life is a topic of some debate among Egyptologists, because so few of these institutions have been definitively identified in the archaeological record. Much of our knowledge comes from descriptions in the texts themselves. The debate centers on how public they were. Were they completely closed, secret institutions, accessible only to a tiny elite of high-ranking priests and royalty? In this view, the House of Life was an instrument of state control, jealously guarding the knowledge that gave the elite their power knowledge of medicine, Noah, ritual, and history. Keeping this knowledge secret was a way of maintaining the mystique and authority of the pharaoh and the priesthood. Or were they slightly more open? Another theory suggests that while they were not public libraries in the modern sense, they may have provided services to a wider, literate audience. A wealthy nobleman might have been able to commission a scribe from the House of Life to create a personalized copy of a wisdom text for his son's education. A temple builder might consult with its scholars on a difficult architectural problem. In this model, the House of Life was less a secret fortress and more a high-end, specialist consultancy, the ultimate source of authoritative information for those who could afford access. The true nature of its accessibility likely varied over time and from temple to temple, but it remains a fascinating question about how knowledge was controlled and disseminated in the ancient world. As Seshat's vision is complete, it is a bold, comprehensive plan for the institutionalization of knowledge. She has imagined a physical space, a dedicated staff, and a clear mission. She has conceived of a place that will not only preserve the past, but will actively shape the future. It will be the intellectual engine of the Egyptian empire for millennia to come. Now, all that remains is to build it. The blueprint that existed in Seshat's divine mind now begins to take shape in the real world. The abstract concept of the House of Life is being translated into stone and order. You are witnessing the founding of the very first true library, an institution that will serve as the prototype for every library, university, and archive that will ever exist. The construction is guided by Seshat's own hand. The walls are thick, the windows are high and narrow to keep out the bleaching sun and the desert dust. Inside, the stone walls feel cool and silent. The main chamber is exactly as she envisioned it, lined from floor to ceiling with those neat, square cubbyholes, a honeycomb of knowledge waiting to be filled. This is the main historical point, the establishment of this physical, organized space dedicated to the preservation of knowledge. The first task is the Great Migration. You watch as a procession of junior scribes carefully carries the chaotic piles of scrolls from the old, overflowing archive room to this new, purpose-built home. But they are not just dumping them. Under the watchful eye of a master librarian, a new role created by Seshat, they begin the monumental task of cataloging. Each scroll is unrolled, its contents briefly examined. The master scribe dictates a title, a subject, and a date to a junior scribe, who notes it on a master list, the world's first library catalog. The scroll is then given a shelf mark, a notation indicating which niche it belongs to. A scroll labeled REL-INC- one might be the first scroll in the religion-incantation section. It is a slow, painstaking process, but with each scroll that is put away in its proper home, order is triumphing over chaos. Once the existing collection is organized, the second function of the House of Life begins the scriptorium. This library is not a static museum. It is a living, breathing entity. The master librarian identifies the most important texts, the core religious documents, the essential medical treatises, the historical annals of the kings. These are the canon of Egyptian knowledge. He then assigns them to his best scribes to be copied. You watch a scribe at work in the sunlit courtyard of the scriptorium. He has two scrolls open before him. One is an old, fragile original. The other is a fresh, blank sheet of papyrus with intense concentration. He reads a line from the old text and then reproduces it perfectly on the new one. This act of copying is a sacred duty. It is how knowledge propagates. It is how the wisdom of the ancestors is passed down to the next generation. A single scribe, in his lifetime, might create dozens of new books, seeding other libraries and ensuring that a text survives even if its original copy crumbles to dust. This practice of manual copying brings us to a quirky and very human problem that librarians and scholars have dealt with ever since the copyists' era. The scribes were highly trained, but they were not machines. You can imagine a scribe dozing off for a moment in the afternoon heat, accidentally skipping a line, or misreading a difficult hieroglyph and substituting a similar minus looking, but incorrect 1. These small errors, once introduced into a text, would then be faithfully reproduced by the next scribe who copied his version. This is how texts evolve and drift over time. Historians who study ancient texts, a practice called philology, spend their careers acting like detectives, comparing different versions of the same text to try and spot these errors, trace them back to their source, and reconstruct what the original, pristine text might have said. The entire field of textual criticism is, in a way, a long running battle against the accumulated sleepiness of thousands of ancient scribes. The very existence of these libraries, and the immense power they held, also leads to a more somber historical debate. What has been lost? We know from lists and references in surviving texts that the libraries of ancient Egypt contained thousands of scrolls that have not survived. We have titles of books we have never read. The Great Library at Alexandria, a later Greek institution but one that inherited the Egyptian tradition, is the most famous example of this loss. Its destruction, whether by a single catastrophic fire or a long period of neglect and piecemeal destruction, appoints scholars still argue about, is seen as one of the greatest intellectual tragedies in human history. How much did they know that we don't? Were there medical texts with cures for diseases we still struggle with? Were there philosophical works that would have completely changed our understanding of ancient thought? Were there historical annals that would have filled in the great, frustrating gaps in our knowledge of the past? Or, as some more skeptical historians argue, are we romanticizing the loss? Perhaps the lost texts were mostly more of what we already have: tax records, minor hymns, and bureaucratic paperwork. We will never know for sure. And that uncertainty is both a source of deep frustration and a catalyst for the romantic imagination. For now, the first House of Life is complete and operational. It stands as a beacon of order and intellect. The scrolls are safe in their stone niches. The scribes are diligently copying the wisdom of the past. Seshat has not just created a building. She has created an engine for the creation and preservation of civilization. It is her masterpiece. The silent, ordered library, the House of Life, is not an empty stage. It needs its actors. And so, your focus shifts from the institution itself to the new kind of human being that Seshat's invention has brought into existence. This is no longer about the tool, but about the hand that wields it. You are about to witness the birth of a new and powerful social class, the Scribe. You find yourself in a sunlit courtyard attached to the House of Life. This is a school, and the air is filled with the low, droning chant of boys memorizing texts and the rhythmic scratching of dozens of pens on papyrus. This is the educational system that Seshat's work has made necessary. The knowledge is now stored, but it needs to be transmitted. A new generation must be trained to read the sacred signs and keep the records of the kingdom. This is the main historical point, the creation of a professional class of literate bureaucrats who would become the administrative backbone of the Egyptian state for 3,000 years. To be a scribe was to have a golden ticket out of a life of hard, physical labor. A popular text from the period, a satire on the trades, hammers this point home. It describes the miserable life of the potter, caked in mud, the metalsmith, with fingers like a crocodile's claws, the soldier, marching endlessly under a hot sun. But the scribe, the text advises. He directs the work of all people. For him there are no taxes, for he pays his tribute in writing. You watch a young boy, perhaps the son of a minor official or a skilled craftsman. On his first day of school, he is terrified. The master is stern, and the discipline is famously harsh. This is the quirky and rather grim detail of scribal education. The primary pedagogical tool was rote memorization, enforced by corporal punishment. A famous Egyptian maxim states, "A boy's ear is on his back. He listens when he is beaten." The goal was to literally beat the knowledge into them, to make the hundreds of complex hieroglyphs and the conventions of grammar an automatic, ingrained reflex. The boy spends years at this. First, he learns to write on cheap, reusable materials, a smooth wooden board coated with plaster, or flat pieces of broken pottery and limestone chips. The ostraca, Papyrus, is far too expensive for a beginner's clumsy scrawls. He spends endless hours copying out simple sentences, lists of words, and passages from famous wisdom texts, which are full of practical and moral advice. He is not just learning a skill. He is being indoctrinated into the culture and values of the ruling class. He is learning how to think like an official. Finally, after years of this grueling training, if he is skilled and diligent, he graduates. He receives his scribe's palette, a long, thin piece of wood with a slot to hold his reed pens and to circular depressions for his cakes of blackened red ink. This is not just a tool. It is his diploma, his badge of office. With this palette tucked into his belt, he is now a member of the elite. He can read a letter from the pharaoh, calculate the yield of a field, or write a legal contract. He holds the keys to the kingdom's information. The rise of this powerful class of technocrats, however, leads to a significant debate among social historians. Was the scribal profession a genuine path for social mobility in ancient Egypt? The official propaganda, like the text satirizing the trades, certainly presents it that way. The message is clear: even a boy from a humble background, through hard work and education, can escape his station and rise to a position of power and influence. It's a powerful narrative of a meritocracy, a way to encourage bright young men to serve the state and to give the lower classes a sense of hope. But was it really true? Some historians are skeptical. They argue that while it might have been possible for a few exceptional individuals to rise through the ranks, the highest scribal positions, the chief scribes of the vizier or the great temple priests, were likely just as hereditary as any other noble title. The sons of high-ranking scribes would have had the best education, the best connections, and a clear path to succeeding their fathers. They suggest that the log cabin to pyramid story was a useful myth, a way for the elite to justify their own power by framing it as earned through intellectual merit rather than inherited privilege. The reality, they argue, was a society that was far more stratified and less mobile than the official texts would have us believe. You watch as the young boy, now a young man, receives his first official assignment. He is sent to a remote outpost on the Nubian border to keep a record of the goods passing through. It is not a glamorous job, but it is a start. He is no longer a farmer or a soldier. He is a scribe. He is a living part of Seshat's legacy. She did not just invent a way to write, she invented a new way to be. The dusty, disciplined world of the scribal school fades. The earnest concentration of the young scribes is replaced by the cool, eternal calm of the divine realm. You are back in the halls of the gods, but the atmosphere has changed since your last visit. The frantic, chaotic energy of a world struggling with its own impermanence has been replaced by a quiet, confident order. The invention has been proven. The system works, and now it is time for a formal recognition. You find yourself in the presence of Thoth, the great Papyrus-headed god of wisdom. But he is not in his library of abstract ideas. He is looking down upon the land of Egypt, observing the fruits of Seshat's labor. The geometric lines of the Ray surveyed fields. He sees the orderly flow of grain into the royal granaries, each sack accounted for. He sees the great temples rising, their foundations perfectly aligned with the stars. He sees the scribes in their offices, the houses of life preserving and copying the sacred texts. He sees a civilization running on the rails of recorded information, and he is impressed. This is the main point of this chapter, the moment of divine acknowledgement, where Thoth, the master of knowledge, formally recognizes Seshat's monumental achievement and solidifies her place in the pantheon. He, the god of the grand, abstract principle, sees the undeniable power and beauty of its practical application. He summons Seshat to his side. There is no grand ceremony, no thunderous proclamation. Thoth is a god of quiet intellect, and his approval is intellectual. He looks at her, and in his gaze, there is a profound respect, the respect of one master craftsman for another. He officially bestows upon her the titles that she has, in truth, already earned for herself. You are Seshat, he declares, his voice like the rustling of dry papyrus. She who scribes, you are the mistress of the house of books. You are the foremost of the library. You are the guardian of the annals of the gods and the histories of kings. This moment cements the divine partnership between them, and it's here that you can see a truly fascinating, unniched detail of their combined iconography. In many temple reliefs, you will see Thoth and Seshat depicted together, performing a sacred task. Thoth will be shown holding the patent pen, representing the divine origin of writing and knowledge. But it is Seshat who is often shown doing the actual writing, her hand the one guiding the pen. It's a beautiful, visual representation of their complementary roles. He is the source of the potential, but she is the agent of its realization. He holds the copyright, but she does the work. In some scenes, they are shown together, recording the name of a pharaoh on the leaves of the sacred dish tree, the tree of life. Thoth might write the king's throne name, the symbol of his divine office, while Seshat writes his birth name, the record of his mortal existence. Together, they create a complete, eternal record of the ruler, granting him immortality in the annals of history. This formal recognition and the establishment of this divine partnership raises a subtle, but important question for historians of religion, particularly those who study gender roles in mythology. Why was the practical, applied act of writing so often personified by a goddess? In many pantheons, the great culture minus bringing inventions are attributed to male deities. But in Egypt, while Thoth holds the ultimate authority over wisdom, the hands minus on, detail minus oriented work of scribing, accounting, and measuring is the domain of a female deity. One theory is that these roles were seen as an extension of household management. In an elite Egyptian household, the mistress of the house was responsible for managing the storerooms, keeping track of supplies, and maintaining the orderly function of the estate. Seshat's role as the divine record minus keeper could be seen as a cosmic version of this domestic, administrative function. She is, in a sense, the ultimate estate manager for the kingdom of the gods. Another perspective suggests that her role connects to the very concept of birth and creation. She is the one who helps give birth to ideas, bringing them from the intangible world of thought into the tangible world of the written word. Just as a mother gives a spirit a physical body, Seshat gives a thought a physical form on the page. Whatever the reason, her prominence as the divine scribe provides a fascinating counterpoint to more male-dominated mythologies. It shows that in the Egyptian worldview, the meticulous, patient, and detail-oriented work of administration and scholarship was not only valued, but was seen as a divine feminine principle. Thoth turns and offers Seshat her own, perfected scribe's palette, one made of celestial lapis lazuli. It is a gift, a promotion, and a confirmation of her status. She is no longer just an assistant or a functionary. She is the acknowledged master of her craft, the goddess who took the chaotic noise of existence and taught it how to speak in the clear, quiet, and eternal voice of the written word. The quiet moment of divine recognition between Thoth and Des solidifies into an eternal duty. Her role is no longer about invention or establishment. It is now about maintenance. You are witnessing Seshat perform her most iconic and enduring ritual, a task that connects the mortal pharaoh to the eternal cosmos and ensures the stability of time itself. You are standing in a mythical, celestial garden. At its center grows the sacred dish tree, the tree of life. This is not a normal tree. Its leaves are not of chlorophyll and cellulose, but of polished lapis lazuli and gleaming electrum. It is a tree that exists outside of normal time, its roots in the beginning of the world, its branches reaching into eternity. On the leaves of this tree, the history of the universe is written, and Seshat is its gardener, its librarian. This is her ultimate role as the eternal record minus keeper. At the coronation of every new pharaoh, a sacred ritual takes place here. The new king is brought before the tree, and he is accompanied by Thoth and Des. It is her job to inscribe his reign onto the fabric of reality. You watch as she takes her divine reed pen. The pharaoh stands before her, a mortal man who has just been transformed into a living god. Seshat reaches up and plucks a fresh, unwritten leaf from the tree. With a steady hand, she begins to write. She draws his carte, the oval rope that encircles and protects her royal name. Inside it, she writes his throne name and his birth name. But she is not just writing his name, she is writing his destiny. This is a beautiful and slightly strange detail of her power. She is not just recording what has happened, she is helping to decree what will happen. Next to his name, she writes the hieroglyph for a jubilee festival, the Hieroglyphs, a ritual of royal renewal meant to be celebrated after 30 years of rule. And next to that, she draws a bent reed, the symbol for millions of years. By writing this, she is not just predicting a long and prosperous reign for the pharaoh, she is actively helping to bring it about. Her act of writing is a powerful magical spell, a divine guarantee of the king's success. It is an act of proactive, rather than reactive, record minus keeping. She hangs the newly inscribed leaf back on a branch of the tree. It now joins the leaves of all the pharaohs who came before, a glittering, chronological record of the kingdom, a family tree of gods and kings. This mythical library of leaves is the ultimate backup, the cloud storage of the Egyptian cosmos. This ritual of writing the king's name on the sacred tree, however, raises a complex question for historians who study the concept of Egyptian kingship. What was the real source of the pharaoh's power? Was it his divine birth, his lineage as the son of Ra? Was it his military might, his ability to conquer his enemies and protect the borders of Egypt? Or was it this bureaucratic, administrative magic, his official entry into the cosmic record by Seshat and Thoth? The divine right theory holds that the pharaoh's authority was inherent, a matter of blood and divine essence. The coronation and its rituals were simply a public affirmation of a pre-minus existing fact. But another, more cynical or perhaps more modern interpretation, suggests that the king wasn't truly the king until the paperwork was done. In this bureaucratic theory of kingship, the pharaoh's power was not fully realized until his name was written down, his reign officially recorded, and his place in the historical timeline secured by the divine scribes. His authority was, in a sense, authorized. This view suggests that the immense power of the scribal class, personified by Seshat, was not just administrative, but also legitimizing. They were not just serving the king, they were, in a way, creating him, at least in his official, eternal form. The debate highlights the tension between charismatic, divine authority and the quiet, procedural power of the bureaucracy. It's a tension that still exists in governments today. You look at the shimmering tree, each leaf a reign, a life, a story. This is Seshat's ultimate achievement. She has conquered the greatest enemy of all forgetting. Because of her work, a king's life is no longer a fleeting story told around a fire. It is a permanent record, etched into the leaves of eternity. She is the historian of the gods, the guardian against the entropy of memory. As long as she tends her tree, the story of Egypt will never truly be lost. The glittering, mythical garden with its tree of life begins to feel distant. The weight of Seshat's accomplishments settles in your mind. She has given the world writing, accounting, architecture, astronomy, libraries, and a way to measure and record time and space. She is, by any measure, one of the most important, foundational figures in the entire pantheon, and yet, she is almost invisible. You are standing now in a place of modern reflection, looking back at the vast panorama of Egyptian mythology, and a question hangs in the air, a quiet but persistent puzzle. Why is a goddess who accomplished so much so consistently? Low-Ski? This is the central, final mystery of Seshat. You sift through the great myths, the epic stories of the gods. You read of the dramatic battles of Ra and Apep, the tragic love story of Isis and Osiris, the fierce and bitter contest between Horus and Set. These are the blockbuster narratives, the tales full of passion, betrayal, and cosmic drama. And Seshat is almost never a main character. She is a supporting player, a background figure. She is the one called in to measure the battlefield after the fight is over, or to record the verdict after the trial is done. Her work is essential, but it is not dramatic. She gets no epic poems, no greeting celebrating her power. This relative obscurity is the core of a quiet debate among feminist scholars and historians of religion. Why was her role so consistently downplayed or framed as subordinate to the male god of wisdom? Thoth, we have seen that in some myths, she is his daughter. In others, his wife or consort. Rarely, if ever, is she depicted as a completely independent actor on the cosmic stage. One theory, the historical reflection theory, suggests that the mythology simply mirrored the social reality of ancient Egypt. While women in Egypt enjoyed a relatively high status compared to other ancient cultures, they could own property, run businesses, and inherit titles. The highest echelons of the state bureaucracy and the priesthood were overwhelmingly male. The relationship between Thoth and Seshat, with the male god as the ultimate authority and the female goddess as the chief administrator, might have been a direct reflection of the power structure of the pharaoh's court. The mythology, in this view, was simply projecting the existing social hierarchy onto the heavens. Another, more philosophical theory looks at the nature of her work itself. Her domains accounting, measurement, cataloging are the invisible scaffolding of civilization. They are fundamentally about creating order, stability, and predictability, and order, by its very nature, is quiet. It doesn't make for exciting stories. A perfectly balanced budget is a monumental achievement, but it doesn't have the narrative punch of a battle against a chaos serpent. Her power was in preventing drama, not creating it. This theory suggests she isn't a minor goddess because she is unimportant, but because her very success is defined by a lack of crises. She is the goddess of things going smoothly, and things going smoothly is not the stuff of epic myth. This brings us to a strange and poignant detail of her legacy, the almost complete lack of dedicated temples. The great gods Amun, Ra, Isis, Horus all had massive cult centers, sprawling temple complexes where thousands of priests served them. But today, archaeologists have not found a single major temple dedicated exclusively to Seshat. She was worshipped everywhere. Her image found in almost every temple library and her name invoked in every foundation ceremony. But she had no home of her own. She was a guest in everyone else's house, a vital consultant who never got her own corner office. So, how should we understand her legacy? Was she a victim of a patriarchal system that consistently undervalued the clerical and administrative work often associated with the feminine, while glorifying the active and executive deeds of the masculine? Or is there a different way to look at it? Perhaps her power was so fundamental, so pervasive, that it didn't need a temple. Her temple was every gridded blueprint, every neat column of a ledger, every library niche, every surveyor's knot. Her worship was the very act of practicing the arts she created. In this view, her lack of a central temple isn't a sign of weakness, but a sign of her ultimate success. She had so completely integrated herself into the operating system of the civilization that she became like the air everywhere, essential and entirely taken for granted. You are left with this quiet paradox. The goddess who created the tools of history is herself a footnote in most histories. The goddess who gave permanence to the stories of others has a story that is faint and full of gaps. She is the ultimate ghostwriter, the silent architect of reality, a powerful but unassuming force who is content to do the work and let others take the credit. The quiet, scholarly puzzle of Seshat's legacy gently fades, and your perspective pulls back, away from the ancient world of gods and Papyrus, all the way back to now. You are here, in this moment, reading these words, and the air around you is buzzing with the invisible descendants of her world. The long journey through the mythical past has led you right back to your own present. Look around you, the book on your nightstand, with its neatly printed pages and its table of contents, the digital clock on your phone, dividing the day into predictable, mathematical units, the architecture of the room you are in, built from a blueprint, its right angles a distant echo of a knotted rope. Every one of these things, every piece of our ordered, modern world, is a testament to her quiet, foundational labor. This is the final, ultimate point. Seshat's inventions are not historical curiosities. They are the invisible operating system of our entire civilization. We have taken her revolutionary ideas and supercharged them. Her hand-drawn blueprint has become our computer-aided design CAD software, capable of modeling structures of unimaginable complexity. Our painstaking census of the population has become the massive, data-driven field of demographics and statistics, a tool used to govern nations and market products. Her careful astronomical observations have blossomed into a science that can map the galaxies and land robots on other worlds. We have taken her core concepts and amplified them beyond her wildest dreams. And this brings us to one last, slightly quirky, modern parallel. Think about the humble spreadsheet on your computer, a grid of cells, capable of holding numbers, words, and formulas. It is the direct, digital descendant of Seshat's gridded papers, her columns of grain tallies. When you create a budget to manage your finances, you are performing the exact same task as that ancient vizier in the royal granary. You are using a system of ordered, written information to bring clarity and control to a potentially chaotic reality. You are, in that small, quiet moment, channeling the spirit of Seshat. The continuity of her legacy raises a final, gentle philosophical question for us to ponder as we conclude our journey in our modern world, so saturated with information, so overwhelmed by the data explosion she inadvertently started. Have we lost something of her original spirit? Seshat's work was always driven by a clear purpose to create order, to preserve wisdom, to build a stable society. She was not just collecting data, she was curating knowledge. Do we still do that? Or have we become a civilization of data hoarders, accumulating vast, chaotic archives of information without a clear sense of its purpose or meaning? We have more information at our fingertips than the entire house of life could have ever contained. But does it make us wiser? This is a debate that rages today among technologists, philosophers, and educators. Are we building a new, digital house of life, a global brain that will elevate humanity? Or are we just building a bigger, more cluttered archive room, a place where true wisdom is once again in danger of being lost in the noise? The answer is not yet written, but the question itself is part of Seshat's legacy. The tools she created, writing, data, archives, are so powerful that they force us to confront these deep questions about ourselves. You look at the words on this screen one last time. They are made of pixels, not ink. They are transmitted by light, not carried by a messenger. But the core principle is unchanged. It is a thought, rescued from the ephemeral world of the mind and given a stable, shareable form. It is a direct line, stretching back thousands of years, to a quiet goddess standing on the banks of the Nile, who looked at a footprint in the mud and saw the future.